The ocean is huge, and covering over 2/3 of the surface of the planet, there is a lot of places for things to hide. But the thought of an island that has been put on our map could completely disappear sounds like a mythical story or old sailor's tale. Yet, surprisingly, there are lots of these so-called phantom islands that were once witnessed by many, some that were even said to have been inhabited, that when attempted to be located were nowhere to be seen. Whether it's down to people's inaccuracies or wild imagination, it's certainly a fascinating topic that I hope you'll enjoy. Here are 5 islands that seemingly vanished from the face of the planet. High Brazil. The island of High Brazil was first noted on maps as far back as 1325, and was placed just west of Ireland. What's interesting about this island is that it wasn't just a one-off sighting. Both St. Barend and St. Brendan, along with many others, came across the island on their voyages, all with the same description of its location and form, and it soon became known as the Promised Land. However, subsequent voyages to search for the island in the 1480s failed to find it, although it's believed John Cabot spotted it in 1497. Since then, no other reported sightings were documented until 1674, when Captain John Nesbitt, an Irish explorer very familiar with the waters of West Island, claimed he sailed into a thick mist, and as it lifted, he realised his ship was dangerously close to rocks. After anchoring, 3 of the crew rowed to the island of High Brazil, and returned a day later with gold and silver they claimed an old man who lived on the island had given them. Nesbitt also claimed it was inhabited by large black rabbits, and the old man lived in a castle by himself. The last documented sighting of High Brazil was in 1872 by author T.J. Westrop, who claimed he had seen the island on previous trips, so took along his mother and friends to verify his claim. They said the island appeared and then vanished before their eyes. After this, it seemed the island fell into the realms of Irish myth, but then something happened in 1980 that you will not believe. Jim Penniston, who you may have remembered me mentioning in this video where I talked about the Rendlesham Forest UFO incident, apparently had binary code etched into his mind after touching the believed alien spaceship. The following day, Jim could not get the thought of the code out of his mind and wrote down 16 pages worth. The first 5 pages of that binary code he wrote down, when converted to text, reads this: Exploration of humanity, followed by coordinates that point to where the island of High Brazil was originally mapped, and also a few iconic locations around the world, such as the Nazca lines in Peru and the Egyptian pyramids in Giza. So what does this mean? Well, no one really knows, and whether it's true or not also cannot be confirmed. If it is, it's one of the craziest things I have ever heard about. Back to the island, did or does High Brazil exist, or was it all just a myth? It's really hard to say since it was mapped so long ago, but the link between that and the Rendlesham Forest incident is truly insane, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Antilia. According to legend, if you visit Antilia Island, you are not allowed to leave, and this is why no one knows where it is. The stories go back to the 15th century, when the island was also known as the Isle of Seven Cities, and was positioned on maps as a rectangle shape, situated west of Spain and Portugal, even appearing on nautical charts. The island is connected to the Muslim conquest of Hispania in c. 714, when 7 Christian Visigothic bishops fled the Muslim conquerors and sailed with their followers westward into the Atlantic Ocean. They came across the island of Antilia and settled there, establishing 7 bases. But despite being put on maps, no one could ever find the island or the bishops. Now, there are tales from the 15th century that state sailors would see the island from a distance and would try to get there since it was thought to be rich with precious metals, but as they approached, it would disappear. Towards the end of the 15th century, when the North Atlantic became a regular sailing route, it was never seen again and gradually disappeared from charts, with many questioning if Antilia ever existed in the first place. Sarah Ann Island. Sarah Ann Island was originally discovered in 1858 by a ship that was part of the New York Guano Company. The island was rich in guano and was quickly claimed by the company under the Guano Islands Act. In case you're wondering what guano is, it's basically bird and bat feces compounded to make a very valuable natural fertilizer and prized source of saltpeter for gunpowder, all of which was big business in the 1840s and 50s, and led to the implementation of the Guano Islands Act, to allow the US to preserve and claim islands they discovered that had lots of it. Sarah Ann Island was one of these. It was located in the South Pacific Ocean just northeast of Christmas Island and was marked on Marina's charts. However, after its first discovery and claiming, nobody returned for 15 years. Then when the USS Portsmouth took a voyage there following the mapped coordinates, there was no sign of it. This was reported, but US map makers refused to believe it was gone, as it had been mentioned in so many ship logs over the years. It wasn't until the 1930s when the island was pinpointed by astronomers as an ideal place to view a major eclipse that was due on June 8, 1937, but they too were unable to locate it. So where had it gone? How could an island just disappear like this? Perhaps it was swallowed up by the ocean and now lays deep below the surface. The official line is that there was a mix-up with whoever wrote down the original coordinates, and they should have read latitude 4 south instead of north, and that Sarah Ann Island is in fact Independence Island. Now this seems quite a big mistake, especially since so many people reported its coordinates. Tuanaki. Now this next disappearing island is a bit more puzzling than the others, because it wasn't just a speck on the map reported by possibly inaccurate navigational equipment. It was an inhabited island that was once part of the Cook Islands, located in the South Pacific Ocean just south of Rarotonga, that apparently vanished along with its entire community. One of the earliest known reports of Tuanaki is from 1842, when a sailor spent 6 days with the natives living there. Then 2 years later, a small group was sent from Raruti, another small island in the vicinity, to look for Tuanaki and meet its locals, but it could not be found. A few years later in 1863, at the approximate position of Tuanaki, J.E. Hammett was sailing between Auckland, New Zealand and Rarotonga when he struck an uncharted set of rocks approximately 8 feet beneath the ocean, that extended for around 1/4 of a mile. These became known as the Hammett Rocks. But it wasn't until 1984 that it was proposed by oceanographer Henry Stommel that the Hammett Rocks was in fact the submerged island of Tuanaki that sank along with its unfortunate residents due to an oceanographic cataclysm, sometime between 1842 and 1844. So surely that's the end of the disappearing island? Well, not really, because the existence of the Hammett Rocks has been questioned over the years, continuing the mystery of what exactly happened to Tuanaki and the many inhabitants that were reported to be living there. Atlantis. I simply could not make a video like this without mentioning the lost city of Atlantis, and despite many believing it's a myth, it's easily the most famous tale of a disappearing island. It was first written about over 2,000 years ago by Greek philosopher Plato, who wrote ancient dialogues that have been deciphered over the years, claiming Atlantis was a major sea power located in the Atlantic Ocean. Plato wrote a lot, but this is a simplified version. He described the city as being populated by a noble and powerful race that was the domain of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, who, along with his offspring, ruled the city, riding around their land on chariots pulled by winged horses, and living in splendor. But the rulers soon got greedy and corrupt, and had to be punished. In one violent surge, the city and its people were swallowed up by the ocean, never to be seen again, and Atlantis was submerged. It all sounds very hard to believe, and there are a few conflicting versions of his dialogue, but Plato's writings are incredibly detailed and specific, especially to do with Atlantis' location. He described it as being at the Pillars of Heracles, in other words, the Strait of Gibraltar as we now know it, located at the mouth of the Mediterranean. Yet, despite many advanced searches and deep-sea probes, no trace of Atlantis has ever been found. But then in 2015, researchers were excited to find a ship off the coast of Sicily that is believed to have sunken over 2,000 years ago. Among the wreckage were 39 ingots said to be made of a metal called orichalcum. Orichalcum is a mysterious, widely debated metal that was believed to have been created by the mythological Greek alchemist named Cadmus. The island of Atlantis was, written by Plato, said to be rich with orichalcum. Some experts say the metal found is not orichalcum, and although tests show it's a metal combination that has never been discovered before, it's thought it would have been created in Gela thousands of years ago and was used for decorations. So did Atlantis exist, or was it the result of Plato's incredibly talented imagination? That's a greatly debated question among historians and archaeologists, and most are divided on their opinions. Now that's not to say Atlantis was home to flying horses, but maybe it did exist and has since been destroyed somehow. After all, the legendary Troy and the Trojan War was believed to be nothing more than a myth, yet that is now thought to have been real. What's to say Atlantis wasn't? What's your thoughts? So there's 5 islands that were once mapped but now seem to no longer exist. Whether this is down to the inaccuracies of sailors or something else, it's interesting to think that during these times these were reported, the people lived and died believing they existed. If not real, to them they were. Thanks for watching, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week for another one.